What it do, what it do? It's your boy G.hemlock and this thing, man. Now look, is Assassin's Creed Mirage a game worth buying? Let's find out.
Assassin's Creed Mirage is the latest entry in a series that has long forgotten its roots, but Ubisoft has assured fans that this time, things will be different.
Long forgotten its roots?
Is that true? Has Assassin's Creed
start.
gone back to what made it successful in the first place, or is this latest entry another Ubisoft marketing mirage? Before I get into the review, I need to stress that while I won't be spoiling any major plot points, there will be some minor gameplay spoilers, such as what menus look like, different enemies, and different abilities, but all of the footage will be from the first few hours of gameplay. For context, the preview build we saw from a few weeks ago took place about a third into the game. While you don't need to play Assassin's Creed Valhalla to understand the story here, I highly recommend you do. Once again, before we begin, I want to talk about honesty and credibility, and if you don't care about that, you can skip to this point in the video. In my previous Mirage video, where I discussed the preview build Ubisoft allowed me to play, many noted that my attempts at honesty were fruitless because my opinion had already been tainted by receiving special treatment from Ubisoft. I totally get where that sentiment comes from, but I take a different approach to credibility. Basically, there are plenty of things that can influence my opinion, and instead of rejecting every special opportunity in front of me in the name of internet points, I think it's better to express honesty through laying all my cards on the table. I can't provide an objective review, I don't believe any human being can, but I can provide my thoughts and the context surrounding them. So with that said, here's what Ubisoft is kind enough to do for me. They gave both myself and our lovely editor Sean codes to play the game early to get this review out on time. I was also able to see different parts of Mirage early and provide feedback on what I saw. And finally, I was able to take a trip to Montreal to tour their studio, but they didn't pay for the flight and only covered part of the hotel. So if you think a $2,000 bill is special treatment, then so be it. With that said, this review's objective is to explain if I think the game is good, worth picking up, and if you should get it. Keep the context in mind, and let's begin. Visually, Mirage is up to the standards that Ubisoft has set in the past. Will it blow you away? No. Does it suffice?
I don't know.
Yes. The environments are designed expertly as always, and Baghdad from certain angles looks downright heavenly, but other aspects of the game take a nosedive into the nether. Back from Valhalla are the conversations that look stiff and unfitting for the characters, and the lip syncing is consistently dodgy, not always noticeable, and when the game shoots for a full-fledged cutscene, things do look great, but it's worth mentioning that the many cutscenes that take place suffer from the same talking head syndrome that plagued the Arkham series. Where Assassin's Creed and Arkham continue to parallel is in the soundtracks. The Arabic instrumentals that accompany your journey are played well, and I greatly appreciate this game opting not to overuse the hell out of Ezio's family. It's a good song, an iconic song, but I'm sick of it. Baghdad is an excellent looking city with an overwhelming amount of people, flora, markets, buildings, boats, camels, and the works. It's a busy city, and it lends itself to the social stealth that has a greater focus here. No skyline is without a tall perch begging to be leapt from, or a post that connects your path across a roof. There's a wide variety of color here, and the contrast of an oasis against the harsh grains of surrounding sand are as much of a sight as the detailed fortresses and towers that watch over the low-rising buildings and awnings that glaze over the streets. It feels familiar in a setting sense to the series' roots, but also in terms of iconography. There's multiple bureaus this time around, and we spend a majority of the game cloaked in white. Attacks and jumps have the proper impact or lack thereof if you're landing on a soft surface, and Basim's voice actor does a fantastic job here, as does the voice actor for Rashawn, whose raspy near constant growl is just mesmerizing. Rashawn also has by far one of the best assassin designs in a while, easily clearing any of the outfits from the last 3 entries, and Basim's different outfits look great too. I appreciated the variety here in both heavy armor and nimble robes. I can't show them all, but I think most will be satisfied with what's on display here. What's further on display is the animations, of which most are overhauled. There are some animations like those when sprinting where it still feels like we're playing as Eivor, which is a problem because the two characters couldn't be more different. Eivor is broad, brooding, and prefers a head-on approach, while Basim is sneakier and more agile, and yet he runs with the same wide strides that seem fit for a Viking. Parkour sees Basim taking a floatier descent, which many noted in the preview build. While some like it and others don't, I fell on the side of liking it. It reinforces how light and quick this character is. Couple this with his upbringing as a thief and the other Basim-related information revealed in Valhalla, and we have animations that, to me, fit the character. Combat looks solid enough, but the takedowns range from feeling impactful and brutal to limp. The specific issue is that the swords can cut through these enemies and their armor like butter, as if there's no resistance. Maybe Basim is just putting all of his force into it, but previous entries had greater sound, and Valhalla's animation saw Eivor occasionally having to take a literal second stab, which went miles for immersion and entertainment. Outside of this nitpick, there's finesse to be found in every corner of the combat, and the stealth takedowns instead take a more traditional approach, which after how long it's been since we've had a traditional entry is fine by me. Finally, the UI looks slick, but it's the biggest reminder of this game being rooted in Valhalla. I mentioned this in my first impressions video that the DNA of Valhalla is very much here. Mirage was initially developed as an expansion for Valhalla, and while there is an overwhelming amount of identity here to separate it from Norway and England, understanding its foundations will explain the issues that plague the game, even if it won't excuse them. Visuals alone can't carry a game, even if they do look quite good in this case. And when people think of Assassin's Creed returning to its roots, the gameplay is the first thing to come to mind, notably the way they move. Movement is... I'm sorry. I really wish I could come on here and say that the movement is fixed. Guys, it's like Unity or it's like the Ezio games, and I'm sorry, it's not. I consider myself a fan of the RPG games. I enjoyed Origins, Odyssey, and while I initially disliked Valhalla, I have come to appreciate it more when replaying it in preparation for Mirage. But in all of those games, I took issue with the lack of freedom in the movement. They simplified it to its core and stripped away all of the complexities in, I assume, an attempt to strip back its clunkiness too. Assassin's Creed, especially the further back you go, had controls that were difficult to pick up. Once you figured them out, they felt great, and I personally wouldn't have changed them at all, but there was a consistent sentiment among critics that the controls were clunky, and honestly, that was true. But it was also true that the games provided a freedom unlike any other. When the first 3 RPG games lacked control, it didn't bother me too much because it wasn't needed. There were only so many ways you can scale a mountain, so many ways you can climb a brick wall, a pyramid, or a longhouse. But Mirage has a dense city that is begging to be explored, so you really feel this lack of expression. The issue isn't that I want to use side ejects or wall ejects so I can gatekeep fans who don't use them, or that I can say, oh, look at me, look at how good I am. I want them so I can have more control over my actions, because at the end of the day, control is expression and expression is fun. I want to be allowed to fully engage with the environment, use these rows of pillars and posts not as pathways, but as tools to help me build my own route. The reason I'm harping on this so much here is because the level design is excellent, and there's no room to utilize it. There's still much to enjoy here, and the chases across rooftops were still adrenaline-filled, which is elevated by the game's great score. The design of the world does a heavy lifting here, but it can't stop me from constantly wanting more from the system. I feel like the hardest part about designing good movement is providing ample area for the player to engage with it, and in Mirage there's so much to climb and yet only one way to do so. The hard part is done, why not go all the way? I understand that it is likely tied to Valhalla's engine not being designed for it from the ground up, but the point remains I wish it was here. Lastly, I felt parkour was more inaccurate here, which I didn't note during my preview session, and I imagine this is due to me playing on the PS5, whereas I played the preview on PC, and I just suck at aiming with the DualSense 5, so I'll chalk this up to a skill issue. I'll dive into this topic more when I eventually do my full critique of the game in a few months, but for now know this: if you were expecting parkour to be anything unlike the last 3 games, then you will be disappointed.
If you're doing that shit on
there's
a rope,
a lot to love about this game because the stealth and combat are truly a step forward for multiple reasons.
Every game,
I cannot talk about combat and stealth individually because they support each other beautifully. Bassam is a sneaky character. He hides and slinks between sightlines naturally and thus is less equipped in combat. Every aspect of the game encourages you to stick to the shadows, and for those that are interested, there are no damage numbers and every assassination is a one-shot. Stealth initially received some pushback because of the chain assassination, which sees you teleporting from one enemy to another, often over extremely unrealistic distances in a flash to take them all out. At first, I assumed this was a glitch in the Animus, but now I don't know, because the first time you use it, Bassam properly reacts to what he did. So maybe he just has superpowers, I don't know. To me, it doesn't really matter. It's totally unrealistic, but given what we know of Bassam, it's fine, and if it does bother you, then you never have to use it outside of when you first get it. Any problem in the game can be solved by either using the chain assassination or by more traditional means, like distractions or smoke bombs. I personally used it plenty because it was fun, but again, if it's not for you, then you don't need to. The tools provided to you in the game were fun, and useful in most cases. Specifically,
honestly,
the smoke bombs and throwing knives came in handy most often, though there are even more options here too. What also makes a return is the crowd blending, which marks the first seamless social stealth game we've gotten in a long time. And it is properly used in the missions too, which sees you tailing, stalking, and often pickpocketing from a crowd. It's important to note the tools available because when stealth is encouraged the way it is here, it needs to be deep, and Mirage succeeds in providing that depth. I had more fun striking from the shadows than I've had in years, and it made the tailing missions genuinely enjoyable, which is another thing I haven't said in years. I found most bases that need to be cleared like their own puzzles, where I had to plan out my attack and execute them quickly to avoid detection, this time from AI that is more alert and detects you quickly. I found myself having to properly scout an area from a high point, use my tools sparingly, and when you inevitably mess up, the combat is strong enough to prevent save scumming most of the time. I think the combat strikes a great balance between the RPG games of late and the older counter-focused combat. The biggest change is in difficulty. As attacks come out fast and mistakes are punished hard, not only does this make combat a more engaging process, but it further encourages stealth, as taking down an entire base from the shadows is significantly easier than slaughtering them loud. And this is doubly true when it feels as though when an enemy detects you, a large portion of the base will too, as guards start blowing their horns and screaming for backup. I did think that the detection was a bit iffy. For example, I would get caught by a guard, quickly kill them, and yet a near minute later I would still be spotted instantly by a guard facing the opposite direction, which was really frustrating. Either way, the combat is good and counter-focused. Enemies have either a red attack, which means you need to dodge, or a white attack, which can be parried. While the flashing lights are appreciated, you will quickly discover that the flash comes out too late for you to react, and thus you need to rely on other visual cues. For example, one-handed sword enemies can always be parried when they swing from their left side, and you must dodge when they swing from their right. Again, I liked having to pay attention more, and once their stagger bar is whittled down, you can instant kill them, with many enemies going down after just one or two counters. I feel as though combat does little to reinvent the wheel, but I also feel it doesn't have to. to. What is here is good because it pushes the player to stick to its greatest facet, stealth. Level design this time around has you flexing your skills in interesting ways. You wear disguises, bribe guards, sneak into places through unorthodox means. If your goal is to quietly leave a trail of bodies towards a target, that is doable, and these extra options are both appreciated and seen at their best in the assassination missions. The black box assassinations from Unity and Syndicate make a return in spectacular fashion. You have a ton of different options in infiltrating a target's location and even more ways of taking them down. For example, there was a target that needed to be rescued from a prison, so I bribed a merchant out front and pretended to be his assistant to get past the guards at the gate. Once inside, I moved to his cell and helped him escape through the roof, an escape that was very loud, mind you, because we were spotted along the way. For an assassination, there was a businessman who I needed to draw out. When I saw a merchant who could not get his goods, I decided to help him by stealing the goods that were inside, so he could leave and announce his departure, causing the target to investigate. This was not the only way I could have gone about this, and the options get even crazier as the game goes on, but of course I can't show it here. The point is, there's a ton of freedom here in how you do anything from assassinating high-ranking members of the Order to how you take down 2 guards in front of you. Sometimes I used a chain assassination, sometimes a smoke bomb, and sometimes I used a throwing knife on one guard and then quickly assassinated the other up close. You could hide bodies to prevent guards from noticing, and you could also leave them in particular spots in order to trap them. There was so much variety, and the level design was frequently open-ended. This applies to most of the game too. You start rather linear as the game sets up the major characters, but after about an hour or two, the game opens wide up, allowing you to tackle a few different threads however you like, with all of them being of equal quality. The mission I played in the demo is available early, but it could be one of the last things you do depending on which threads intrigue you the most. Every mission here is framed around an investigation. You have investigations surrounding the Order members, but you also have side investigations, such as a character who needs some books returned, and a really cool one that again I won't spoil. There's plenty to do in the open world, and the side quests are great. They either provide fun gameplay or enhance the world. While traveling to an objective, I overheard a young boy saying he would jump from a tower. I climbed up to find out more, and I learned that he was trying to get the attention of the Hidden Ones. Once I taught the boy roughly how to do a leap of faith, he thanked me and said that once he's old enough, he'll join the Hidden Ones. It was a great mission because of a particular reveal, and with how it showed where the Hidden Ones stand in Baghdad, being seen as vigilante-esque heroes, and most side content is like this. Another note about the choices is that there's no longer any major choices in the story outside of the normal dialogue choices when selecting menus from stores. Speaking of which, there's an Animus store here. Yippee. When I played, there was nothing here, but Lord knows if this game is anything like Valhalla, then they will be sure to keep the coolest looking outfits behind a $9 paywall. There's not much to say, it just sucks. Finally, the story here is well done and not bloated like the last few entries. It focuses on the Order of the Ancients having seeped their roots into Baghdad, and our hidden ones, including their new recruit Basim, having to figure out a way to identify the members, stop their plans, all while Basim fights an inner demon that haunts his dreams. Basim is a particularly likable character this time around, as is his lifelong friend Nihal and Basim's mentor Rashan. The story takes some interesting turns, and there's a pretty impressive twist at the end too, which was appreciated. It felt well written, took itself seriously while also still having some fun, and while the open nature of the second act can make the story feel as though it's jumping around a bit, which staggers the pacing, I overall enjoyed it plenty. I understand that I can't provide too many examples here, but the best I can say is that I like this story more than Odyssey and Valhalla, but not necessarily as much as Origins. Mirage is a shorter game, clocking in at around 12 hours for me to beat the main campaign, and honestly, I felt that was a perfect length. It didn't overstay its welcome, and in fact, once I 100% complete it, which full transparency I have not yet, I still have some collectibles missing, I'll likely play the game again and try different gameplay choices. A final note, performance on the PS5 was pretty solid. I played through the entire game in performance mode and very rarely experienced frame drops, and I imagine the game will run even better after a day 1 patch, though Jedi Survivor taught me to not rely on it. There were some visual glitches, but nothing that got in the way of gameplay and nothing that isn't the usual Ubisoft fare at this point. When I ended my hour-long Assassin's Creed Valhalla video, I said this: I think if Ubisoft takes the development time, money, and effort that they put into this game and put it into like a 20 or 30 hour adventure and scaled down the scope, they could seriously have a masterpiece on their hands. Mirage feels like Ubisoft saw this. I know they didn't, but the point is that for years now, this is a game that I've been looking for. And while Mirage isn't a masterpiece, I think it's plenty good. So do I think you should get the game? If you're a fan of the RPG games, yes. If you don't mind the last few entries, yes. But if you are a die-hard old-school fan who particularly loves the parkour, it may not be worth your money. Do keep in mind that this is retailing at a reduced price of $69.99 Canadian and $49.99 American. And to answer the question, is Assassin's Creed back? Not entirely, but Mirage is a colossal leap in the right direction. And if the next game has deeper movement with this same level of care within its combat, stealth, world, and story, I'd say we have a certified masterwork on our hands. As of right now, keeping the recency bias in mind, Mirage is one of the best Assassin's Creed games in a while, and it's clear that Ubisoft Bordeaux know what they're doing.
Unity,
Assassin's Creed Mirage releases on October 5th. Will you be getting
didn't
it?
play
Why
Valhalla,
or why not?
Odyssey,
I want to thank you for
Black
watching this
Flag.
review, and
Well, there you have it, folks. A quick review of Assassin's Creed Mirage. Now, I don't know. Is the game worth buying? I think it is worth buying, but it's just not better than a lot of other Assassin's Creed games, like back in the day. Like Revelations and Origins, favorite. But leave it in the comments below if you think that the game is worth buying. Like I said, I think it's pretty worth buying. It ain't all that, but don't want to judge a book by its cover. And actually, I think I'm gonna play that game. Once I get it, I'm gonna record it. So tag into my gaming channel at Super Knight. I will put a link in the description to my gaming channel. So go check that out. I think those are the best Assassin's Creed games, to be honest. It's the boy G.hemlock. I'm out.